Turn on a light bulb, it fills the room, and it passes straight through your hand like it was never there, harmless. Now take that same light, add nothing, take nothing away, just make every wave move in step, and that same harmless light becomes a laser, strong enough to cut through steel. Nothing was added, nothing grew stronger. The only thing that changed was that it moved as one. Now hold that thought, because this is not a story about light. It is a story about a country, a land that once fed the world and was made to feel small, a people that was scattered until the day it moved as one, and no empire on this earth could hold it. This is the story of how India became free, and why the same law still decides everything that happens next. Forget the country you were taught to picture. Forget developing. Forget third world. Forget poor, because before the ships came, this was the richest corner of the planet. For most of human history, almost a quarter of the world's wealth was here. Its cloth-clothed emperors, its steel outlasted theirs. Its universities were full 1,000 years before Oxford laid a single stone. The world did not pity this land. The world came here to learn. Remember that, because what came next was not a weak people being conquered. It was a strong people being taught to forget. It did not start with an army. It started with a company, merchants, a few thousand men, an ocean from home, outnumbered 1,000 to 1. So ask the question history skips over. How do a few thousand traders come to own a fifth of the human race? Not with guns. There were never enough guns. First, they took the trade, then the land, then the taxes, until the richest country on earth was pouring itself into someone else's pocket. But gold was never the real chain. The real chain was quieter. It went into the mind. Year after year, a whole civilization was fed a single lie, that it was smaller, backward, lucky to be ruled. And that is the cruel genius of empire. You never have to hold a man down if you can teach him to kneel on his own. But a people that remembers what it once was is dangerous. So the rulers reached for the oldest weapon ever made, not a sword, not a cannon, 3 words, divide and rule. They looked at a land of 1,000 tongues and 100 faiths, people who had shared the same streets for centuries, and whispered to each one, your enemy is not the empire, your enemy is your neighbor. Not because they were different, they were always different. That was never the wound, but a house that turns on itself has no strength left for the door. You do not need to defeat a people, you only need to make them fight each other. And when the anger finally rose, in a walled garden in Amritsar, in the spring of 1919, they met it with bullets, hundreds, unarmed, children among them, gone in 10 minutes. They meant it as a warning, to break what was left of the spirit. Instead, they lit it, because something had been born that no bullet could kill, not an army, not a weapon, an idea, that this land was never made to kneel. It passed from village to village, from voice to voice, a boy named Bhagat Singh, who walked to the gallows smiling. At 23, a soldier named Subhas Chandra Bose, who raised an army and asked his people for their blood and promised them freedom. A thin man in a plain white cloth named Gandhi, who bent down on an empty beach and lifted a fistful of salt and made the greatest empire on earth tremble without raising a single fist. Different men, different fire. Some chose prayer, some chose the gun, but every one of them was tuned to the same note. And courage is contagious. Because the moment one person stands and is not struck down, the fear that kept 1 million people seated cracks. The Salt March. Quit India. Millions of ordinary people, farmers, students, mothers, names no history book will ever hold, moving for the first time in 200 years in the same direction. And the empire that had crushed armies did not know what to do with that, because it was never weakness that ruled this land. It was division, and the division was over. Midnight, the 15th of August, 1947, 100 million voices, one word, Azad, free. It began with almost nothing, a land bled dry, borders drawn in blood, millions with nothing but a flag and a promise that sounded impossible. Now, look at it. A country that once could not feed its own children, now feeds a sixth of humanity, the grandchildren of a colony, landed a craft where no nation in history had ever reached, the dark south pole of the moon, one of the fastest rising economies on the planet. 1 billion people moving money with a touch of a finger, the youngest great nation in the world. This was never the story of a weak people becoming strong. It was always the story of a strong people, remembering what they were. But do not close the story just yet, because the empire learned something before it left. The chains are gone. The trick is not. Every single day, in a new costume, someone still tries to turn this house against itself, region against region, faith against faith, neighbor against neighbor, on a screen, in a headline, in an argument built so that no one wins, only so the country forgets, one more time, that everything it has, it built by standing together. The empire needed 200 years to scatter this land. Now a single lie can do it, in an afternoon. Here is the strange part. The past is finished. It is carved. It cannot change. But the future has not happened yet. The India of 2047, 100 years free, does not exist. Not yet. Right now it is every version of itself, at once, waiting for someone to choose. And what decides which future becomes real is the same law it always was, whether this people moves as one or lets itself be pulled apart. One more time. The future is not a fact, it is a wave, and every single one of you is the phase. They brought the largest empire the world had ever known. And this country did not break. They stayed 200 years. And this country did not break. They took its wealth, its name, even its story, and still it did not break. Because an empire was never strong enough to break this land. Only one thing ever was, the day it turned against itself. That was the only war this country ever lost, and the only one it can still lose. The empire is gone. No ship is coming. No one is waiting to rule you. You are free. So the last question is not for them. It is for you. When they try to scatter you, and they will try, will you hold the line? If this stirred something you had forgotten, carry it out of the screen and into your day. Happy Independence Day to you and to a country that was knocked down for 200 years and stood back up. Stay in phase and come back for the next one.